Good morning, everyone. Firstly, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a real honour. And also thank you for the wonderful introduction and for the acknowledgement of country as well. I would also like to acknowledge country in that we are on beautiful land here today, and you are so lucky that you get to have retreat here, to learn, to listen, to share stories, to reflect. And I think as you're doing this through this experience, please make sure that you're also reflecting on the significance of Aboriginal culture, traditions. We have so much to learn, and these lessons can carry you through life, and I'll be reflecting on some of these today. So I acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now, I want to start with, do we have, this isn't working already. Could I have my clicking happening again? Thank you. That's so annoying. Sorry. Okay, I apologise. So, I have a question for all of you today. Put your hand up if you have moved schools more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. Amazing. Okay, so next slide. How many schools do you think I may have gone to? Who thinks A? B? Anyone? Yeah, okay, good percentage. C? Cool. Yeah, it's C. 26 schools. So that's a lot, right? Now, when I was in year 9, I was at my 25th school, moving to my 26th school. So most of those school changes occurred in my earlier years of primary school and early high school. And then that carried through. Luckily, I got to stay at the same school from year 9 to year 12. So that's probably the main contributing factor as to why I was able to finish high school. But you can imagine how challenging that would have been. I just want you to reflect for a moment and just think about what sort of things that would have impacted in your schooling journey. Have a think and then raise your hands if you would like to contribute any thoughts as to how that would impact your schooling journey. Hands up. Any ideas? How would this many school changes affect your schooling? Yep. Can't get comfortable. Absolutely. I was incredibly unsettled. So there was no consistency, no stability. Anything else? Hands up. Don't be shy. Yep. Losing friends. Absolutely. You know what? It was hard enough to make friends, and keeping friends was incredibly challenging as well. And I was constantly losing friends. So that wasn't just hard socially, but there was a lot of grief as well. Yeah? Anything else? Hands up. Yep. Student-teacher relationships. Love that. It was really, really hard for me to learn because not only was I constantly moving schools, I never had consistent teaching figures in my life. And so not only was that hard from the relationship perspective, but it also meant that I'd learn some academic concepts 4 times, and I'd get really boss at it, and other things I'd miss altogether. I didn't learn how to read a clock until I was 20. So there's lots of things that you might take for granted being at school. And I think one of them that is very often frequently overlooked is the stability that you have. Not just stability in terms of being in the one place, but stable people around you, friendships, connections, environment, consistency with your learning, all that sort of stuff. So just take a moment to reflect on that. Now, you're probably wondering why I went to all of these different schools. I will get into some of the more complex reasons later, but the most initial reason was that we had no money. It was just my mum and I, and we didn't have any family, no other support, and my mum didn't have an education, and she suffered immensely with mental illness. And so what this meant was living just paycheck to paycheck on whatever government support she could access, which was very minimal. And it meant that we were always moving homes because every time a house popped up that was $5 cheaper a week, we would move. So this would also lead to school changes. So I actually moved a lot more houses than I did schools. So that was very, very hard. Now, if you imagine what it would be also like for not having a great deal of money, this also meant that we didn't have a lot of resources, clean clothes. I would often go to school with head lice, and I missed out on a lot of extracurricular activities. So I didn't get to do any extracurricular sports. I was desperate to do dancing or gymnastics as a kid, or little athletics. They were like my top 3 dreams. And I never got to do any of those things. I didn't even get to do swimming lessons. So I still don't know how to swim. I will eventually, I'll go and learn. But yeah, all of these things we sort of take for granted is these opportunities, this stuff that I missed out on. Here's my mum and I. So you can see that, you know, we're playing basketball together at the basketball court, which was a really lovely experience, but we're both not in the nicest of clothing. So I love a great op shop now. I love op shopping on my own terms, but when I was growing up, that was our only option. And there wasn't a great deal of options for op shops in a country, rural town. So yeah, we never really looked trendy, never had what we needed, and that made it extra hard socially as well, because it was really hard to fit in. But irrespective of that, she still tried her best. Here's my mum and I again. You can actually see that she's in the same shirt, and these photos are probably more than 20 years apart. And so that's further, I guess, evidence that she couldn't afford to replace things. So she really had to make things last. Now the photo on the right was my last time with my mum before she passed away from liver cancer 2 years ago. So it's incredibly sad. But yeah, I'm so glad that I got these memories with her. Now, in amongst all of these changes, all of these chaotic things that were happening in our personal lives at home, with my mum suffering with mental illness, she ended up going down quite a significant path of ill mental health. And so she was turning to things like alcohol, drugs to cope, and didn't look to her support network or professional support to try and help her through these complex feelings that she was going through. And so in addition to the financial struggles that we had, and mum's mental illnesses, and then the addictions, I was incredibly neglected. So this was picked up by all the schools that I went to. You know, teachers would notice, kids would notice, my friends' parents would notice, our neighbours would notice, everyone was noticing that, you know, I'd come to school in pajamas, or yesterday's school uniform, come to school without lunch, that sort of thing. And so that was really, really hard. And so what that led to was one day, quiet little country town, we get a knock on the door. Now keep in mind, in this quiet little country town, close to the school, I would often answer the door because kids from school would, you know, we'd knock on each other's doors and we'd go play in the cul-de-sac, right? But on this particular occasion, we got a knock on the door, I answered the door, as usual, and it was not kids from school. It was 2 strangers who I have never seen before, 2 women, and one of these women grabbed me by the wrist and threw me over her shoulder and carried me to her car. I was kicking and screaming, I bit her ear, I was doing whatever I was capable of doing as any 8-year-old little girl would, and I was absolutely convinced I was being kidnapped. I was screaming so loud that neighbours were coming out, everyone was like concerned, what's going on? And I remember looking over my shoulder before being put in the car and seeing my mum restrained on the ground by like 4 police officers. And I remember thinking, why are these police officers helping me get kidnapped, right? And this was my thought process as an 8-year-old, like it made no sense to me. And anyway, so I got put in the car and they're interrogating me, asking me questions, and I refused to participate, just like the movies. And it genuinely took a year or 2 later for me to realise that I was actually in foster care. Who's heard of foster care before? Does anyone know what it is? Anyone want to share their ideas of what they think foster care might be? Hands up, don't be shy. It's okay if it's wrong. Get your thoughts. Yep. Yeah, other people taking care of children. And when would that happen? When would other people need to take care of children? Yep. When the parents aren't in the picture. Yep, and that could be for a variety of different reasons, right? So there could be parents who are sick and are physically unable to care for their kids and the kids need somewhere safe to go. They might not be able to stay with family. It could be because the parents are incapable, whether it be that they're absent or they're neglectful or abusive, that sort of thing. There's a variety of different reasons why kids end up in foster care. And there are a variety of different types of foster care. There's emergency short-term, and that emergency short-term is usually overnight to a couple of days, maybe a week or two tops. There's like short to medium term, which is like a couple of weeks to a couple of months, maybe a year at most, and then long-term care. Yeah? So my experience of entering foster care is not necessarily the norm. And this was, of course, 20 years ago, so things may be a little bit different now. But yeah, everyone's experience is unique. Some people have a much more traumatic experience than I did, and others might have a much less traumatic experience. So it's important to know that mine isn't like a standard, if that makes sense. So yeah, I ended up in foster care. Now, because I ended up moving from short-term to short-term to short-term to short-term homes, I ended up moving schools again and again and again and again. So I moved a lot with mum, and then I moved a lot in foster care. And it's ironic because foster care is there to keep me safe, right? But it was the same instability. Yes, I might have had food, but I was now traumatized and I still didn't have that stability. So a little ironic. Yes, next slide. Thank you. Here are some photos of me when I was in lots of different school uniforms at lots of different schools, just so you can see the contrast. I obviously have photos from other year groups as well, but just to give you a snapshot. So yeah, I just want you to just reflect on that for a moment and just think about how challenging that would be if you were in those situations. How would you have reacted? How would you have behaved at school? How would you have felt? How would you have engaged with your learning? How would that have impacted you? For me, it was not just the academic and the social side of things. I really, really struggled to maintain hope that I was going to have a positive future, because my mum is my role model, and then, the foster caring situation, I didn't have any consistent positive role model to look forward to where I was going to grow up. So that was very, very hard. Here is my sister and I. My sister's name is Carly, and she is 17 years older than me. Put your hand up if you've got a sibling. Cool, vast majority of you. Now, I would love you to picture for a moment, if you are the eldest sibling, can you please picture being the sole carer for your younger sibling? No parents, no other help. Just imagine what it would be like to be fully parentally responsible for your younger sibling. And if you are the younger sibling, I want you to imagine being parented by your elder sibling. Would you enjoy that? Yeah? So this is what ended up being reality for my sister and I. When I was 11, my sister Carly, she ended up getting full custody of me. And that was honestly the best for the first year or two, because it was like two sisters living together. We had so much fun. She really didn't want to be my parent, and we just got along like a house on fire. We did all the fun things, and it was just the best. But then I reached my teenage years, and my sister actually had to start parenting me, which didn't go down very well. I wanted her to be my sister. I didn't want her to be my parent. And she wanted to be my sister, and she hated being the parent figure too. So we ended up clashing, and there was a lot of arguments, and it really, really challenged and strained our relationship. Because of my sisters also going through those challenging things that I did with my mum, she had her own trauma, and then trying to support me, so hard for her. Now, just like my mum, unfortunately, my sister also started to spiral. She decided that the best way to soothe those complex feelings that she was experiencing was to also turn to drugs and alcohol. And my sister was so much better at hiding it. She would go out on weekends and leave me with babysitters, and she would go on these huge benders and try to hide it from me, and then come back recovered. But I always knew something was up. So she was much better at hiding it. I didn't know that this was something that she was doing until I was maybe 16. But my mum, she would do it in front of me. And it's just crazy to think that my sister tried to shelter me from all of that, and then ended up being the one continuing to expose me to it. Because of my sister's drug addictions, we also had no money. And we also had to keep moving, just like with my mum. So the cycle literally repeated itself. And that's how I ended up with 26 school changes. I felt totally failed from every single step of the way. Every single possible care figure who was supposed to be there for me just utterly failed me. I still haven't spoken to my sister in quite a long time, and if you would like to ask more questions about that, I welcome that at question time. But yeah, just reflect on how challenging it would be if you were to look after your siblings or be looked after by your siblings. It might be nice and rosy, or it might be hard. Despite all of this, I've given you lots of grim, info. And also, because I've been sharing some quite confronting things, if any of this has been challenging to hear, I really encourage you to reach out to your teachers or your school counsellor, anyone in the wellbeing space, and just have these conversations to protect yourself. But I thank you for listening to the most challenging part. Now, I really didn't want to be anything like all of that. I could see that my sister repeated the same pattern that my mum did. I could see how much misery that brought both them and people around them. And I was like, I'm never going to be like that. I want to be as far away from that as possible. I don't want this to dictate my future, and I want to have a good life. So, metaphorically, obviously, pulled a Uno reverse card and was like, I'm flipping the switch, yeah? Now I am the CEO and founder of We Future Leaders. We're a local tutoring company in the Sutherland Shire, so near your school. We work with kids from preschool to uni to help them to reach their academic and personal potential. We do like one-to-one and small group stuff, but we also do school talks and workshops like this. I now have 50 staff, and we help thousands of kids every single year. And it's just crazy to me that I was able to go from the life that I had to where I am now. Here's a photo of me at another leadership conference, which was earlier this year. There was kids from 4 different countries, which felt like such an amazing achievement for me to be able to reach that level of audience from such a global perspective. Here's me winning some awards. On the right is, or the left, sorry, I was the winner for the Business Services Best Host Employer for hosting work placement students for Year 11 and 12 Business Services. In the middle and in the top right, I was a finalist for New South Wales Young Woman of the Year in 2021 and this year. And in the bottom corner, I was a finalist for 7 News Young Achiever of the Year award. That was a few years ago and also this year. Some more talks, really cool. The reason why I'm sharing all of this with you is just to show you the contrast. And I'm also super proud. I am so proud to share that this has been my journey. And I think we don't celebrate our achievements enough. So yeah, I really, really want to highlight these highlights with you. There we go, yay. That's my husband and I. We got married 3 years ago, that's James. And then our 3 fur babies. We've got Nala, Rupert and Percy. So yeah, I really love that I get to have this family now. And I created this. I feel like I've actually broken the cycle. And it wasn't like this easy thing, nor was it this really, really challenging thing. I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I really wanted to share this pride that I have for this life that I have to show you that you guys can do it too. Here's one of our learning centres as we were setting it up. It's all furnished now, but we have 2 learning spaces, one in Tarrant Point and one in Kirrawee. And yeah, this is where students get to come and do their learning with us, which is really, really awesome. Now, who wants to have a guess as to who this might be? Anyone? Hands up. Don't be shy. Any guesses? Yep. An uncle? Yep. A dad? Yeah. Anyone else? Yep. Father-in-law? Cool. Love it. Love the guesses. You're all thinking family. I love it. End of last year, I did a DNA test and I found my dad. So this is my dad. His name is Gordon. And it's really awesome because my husband's dad's name is also Gordon. So now I've got 2 dads named Gordon. They're competing it out for Gordo 1 and Gordo 2, which is really funny. Yeah, I did this DNA test. The last thing I was expecting was to find my actual dad. I was expecting to find maybe some distant relatives on my dad's side. And I just really wanted to know my heritage. But here I am getting my dad in contact with me. And I also have 3 more siblings. So now I have 2 more sisters, I have a brother, and now I'm an auntie to like 10 kids. So I'm like super busy now. Just really, really crazy how it's all come together. What I want to go into now is how I actually got from the bad to the good, because there is not a linear way to get there. It's a lot of consistent steps that take a lot of effort, okay? So, change is inevitable. What does the word inevitable mean? Yep. It's going to happen, regardless. It's bound to happen. All of you in this room have already experienced great change. All of you, right? Some of that change might have been expected, unexpected, positive or negative, but all of you have experienced change. And none of you are immune from change happening again. You will all continue to have change. What is probably the biggest change that you're about to face coming up? Hands up. Yep. Finishing school, yeah. You're going to go from this environment that you're super familiar with, and this system that has been your routine day in and day out for 13 years, and then that's going to stop very suddenly, yeah? Now, all of you are excited, nervous about this change, right? And some would say that it's a positive change, some would just say it's neutral, it's part of growing up, but this change is happening whether you like it or not. And some people cope really well with positive or negative change, and some people don't. How many times have you seen celebrities on the news or whatever who have worked their whole lives trying to reach this level of success, and then they finally get there and they don't know how to cope with it? And they go off the rails and they fall off the charts, right? They weren't able to cope with that positive change. So being resilient is not just about overcoming difficult things. It's about overcoming and responding to all types of change, yeah? So this is why it's relevant for you. Even if you've got a pretty stable, happy life, you don't know when you'll need resilience. Resilience is resourcefulness. I have always hated the definition that resilience is bouncing back. Like as a kid, I was like, why are we bouncing? Where are we bouncing from? And where are we bouncing to? It just seemed like so wishy-washy and didn't hit the nerve for me, okay? So what I've learned about resilience, I was always called a resilient kid, but I could never figure out why until recently. And I realized that me being resilient was because I was resourceful. Who knows what resourcefulness is or being resourceful is? Hands up. Come on, fam, you got this. What's resourcefulness? Yeah. Using what you've got available to you. Absolutely, right? Using what you have available to you, making the most of what you have. Now think about the resources that little Darian had. Did she have much? No. And what was I able to create with that? Quite a lot, yeah? And so it doesn't matter what amount or type of resources you have, you can literally create whatever life you want, okay? So resourcefulness is making the most of what you have, that's part one, but it's also figuring out what you need and actively building those things, okay? I knew that I needed connections, I knew I needed role models, I knew I needed to get an education, I knew that I needed money, I knew I needed support, and so I actively tried to build those resources along my journey. I didn't know how, I just tried to look for them in every single opportunity, yeah? Another part of resourcefulness is actually making sure you know how to access and when to access those resources. Let's say, for example, a paramedic, yeah? Is it a wise idea that they practice CPR for the first time on someone who's dying? No. They've got the skill of practicing CPR, but if they've never practiced it before until it's like really, really urgent, that's not being resourceful. How many times have you had an anxiety attack or felt anxious and when someone told you just breathe, right? Breathing actually really, really helps if you can do some breathing techniques during an anxiety attack, but if you don't practice breathing before the anxiety attack, you're not going to be able to use it in one. Does that make sense? So yeah, utilizing and practicing those resources in preparation for when you'll need it is an act of resourcefulness. How many of you in class have been like, oh, miss, why do we have to learn this? This sucks. Like, I'm never going to need to use this. Who needs algebra anyway? All of us have had this thought at some point. Am I right? Yeah, it's universal. Me too. Even a super nerdy kid that I was, all right? So rather than asking, is it useful? Like, when am I ever going to need this? Like, I don't need this. Ask yourself if it's helpful or hurtful. Yeah? Let me give you an example. For the algebra side of things, okay, let's say, for example, you never do need algebra. Let's say you don't ever need it. The skill of learning how to solve problems and apply skills to new situations, of preparing for tests or preparing for something that's in advance, all of these things are transferable skills that will help you for the rest of your life, regardless of where you are. Also, statistically, your generation is most likely to change careers more frequently than any previous generation ever. So you might have an idea in your mind of what you want to do, but I guarantee that'll change. Even if you start your first career is what you're deciding now, you'll probably change that, and that's okay, and that's a good thing. But my point is that you don't know what skills you need yet. You don't know what tools you need yet. So asking yourself if it's useful or not is actually really limiting, okay? So the more helpful thing to do is ask yourself, is it helpful or hurtful? Is it helpful to disengage or hurtful? Is it helpful to just make the most of the class and be a sponge and soak up what you can, or hurtful? Yeah? So use the helpful versus hurtful model instead of, is it useful or not? Stock-taking gratitude. What I mean by this is you need to actually consciously think about what resources you have access to. Put your hand up if you think you have access to more resources than I did at your age. Pretty crazy, hey? Yeah? So you already are aware of that. I want you to actually think about what you actually have access to, both internally and externally, and show gratitude for it. You all go to a Catholic school, right? I want you to think, if there was something that you wanted, whether it be wealth, success, whatever, why would God, why would the universe, why would fate, whatever you want to call it, why would they give you what you want if you're not grateful for what you already have? So, practicing gratitude is an act of resourcefulness too. Don't wait until rock bottom until you seek support. Don't wait until you're failing classes to get help from your teachers or start paying attention. Don't wait until you're having really hurtful self-thoughts or beliefs about yourself before you see the counsellor or get psychological help or tell your parents. Don't wait until you're at rock bottom to get help. If you do wait until rock bottom, that's okay. You can still get help, but it's a much longer journey, isn't it? Okay? So you can access your resources, your support networks, the help that you have available to you at any point. And the earlier you do it and the more consistently that you do it, the better outcomes you're going to have. Does that make sense? Cool. Dreams don't come from being realistic. What do I mean by this? When I was growing up in foster care, the standard for me was on the floor. The standard was that I would drop out of school and that I would follow the same path, that I'd end up at either juvenile detention or I'd end up on drugs or I'd end up pregnant at 14, 15. That was genuinely the bar for me. And I know this because any time that a caseworker would check in on me, they're the sort of questions that I'd be asked. Darian, like, really, you're still in school? And like they'd ask it to me in that sort of way. It's like not a really nice feeling. And even if I was dropping out of school, even if I was pregnant at 14 or 15, even if I did have an addiction, those questions were still so hurtful because they compound that stereotype. rather than offering me empathy and support. Yeah? And so I encourage all of you that if you see these other young people or adults throughout your entire life who might have fallen off the tracks or gone down the wrong path, have empathy and compassion for them rather than judging them, because you don't know how they ended up there. Aim at the target. Now, who's done archery before? Some of you? Yeah, cool. Okay, whether you have or haven't, obviously we're gonna aim at the target, right? What if it's the first time we've done archery? Are we likely to hit the target? Probably not. We might, if we're lucky or skilled. But where is it more likely to land? On the floor, or maybe the next person's target. Yeah? So it's unlikely to land where you want it to go, but you still aim at the target. Now, the amount of students that I hear as a tutoring company, kids say, oh, I'm probably only gonna get a 50 or a 60, so that's just what I'll aim for. That's all I can do. Well, yeah, if that's where you're gonna aim, that's probably where you're gonna land. And that's okay, right? But you can't expect different results from the same method. If you want to do better, you've got to aim for the top. Even if it's unrealistic, aim for the 90. Aim for it. Because if you start behaving like a 90 plus student, you'll probably actually start achieving like a 90 plus student. Does that make sense? Same goes for sport, music, the arts, finances, whatever it is. You have to aim high for you to land somewhere closer to that, yeah? So aim at the target. As you're thinking big, I want you to dream as big and crazy and whatever that huge, audacious, hairy goal is. I want you to really, really go for that. Think big. There's no limitations. But I want you to act small. We can't expect these huge achievements to happen overnight. They're little micro choices that happen along the way, okay? In every waking moment, you make decisions all the time. Right now, you're making the decisions to listen or zone out, right? That's a decision that you're making right now in this micro moment. And every day in class, every day when you get home from school, every day when you wake up and grab your phone and scroll on Reels, whatever it is, they are micro choices that you're making in every moment. And they all add up, they all compound, okay? So if you continue to take the right little steps in the right direction as you go, you will end up there. Achieving it is inevitable. You will get there. But if you try to take too big of a step, you might be able to take one big step successfully, but it'll be exhausting and you won't be able to sustain it. Yeah? So little micro choices, consistency over time is better than trying to act big. Think big, act small. Motivation and discipline aren't the same thing. How many of you frequently say, oh, I can't be bothered, I'm just not feeling motivated. Oh, when I'm motivated, I'll start. Just can't be bothered. Who relates? Yeah? I promise that feeling's gonna escalate this year. Over the course of year 12, resistance is strongest at the finish line. You're going to not feel motivation at a lot of points throughout your HSC. Imagine I'm an Olympic athlete. Do you think I'm actually motivated to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's pouring rain and freezing cold while my family is like snug asleep in bed and in the doona, right? While I get up and train for 6 hours when I'm really, really sore from the day before? Like, do you really think that any Olympic athlete would be motivated to do that? No. That sucks, right? That's really hard work, and that takes a lot of mental effort and grit and determination. And that's why motivation and discipline aren't the same thing. If you want to achieve something, whether it's in school or in sport or whatever it is, whatever the big crazy dream is, you need to remember that you can't rely on motivation. Motivation is an emotion, it's fleeting like the wind, okay? You can't control when it'll come and go. But discipline is a choice. Discipline is feeling the fear or feeling the not botheredness and doing it anyway. All of you, every single one of you know exactly what you need to do to get to the next step, to get wherever you want to go, but you need to make the choice using discipline to actually do those actions. And you can't blame lack of motivation for not getting there. Cool. The larger the dream, the greater the need for self-compassion. As you have big dreams, there's going to be many moments where you'll fall, fail, need to take a detour, things won't go to plan. And often in these moments, we are very self-critical. I've seen so many students time and time after again, like metaphorically, really, really bash themselves over the fact that they didn't get the mark that they wanted, or they didn't beat their PB, or they sang a bit off that day in the musical, whatever it is, right? And that criticism is so hurtful. It's so hurtful. Now imagine little Darian, a little 8-year-old girl, going through all those challenges, and everything's totally out of my control, but I'm doing my best. Can you imagine how much more damaging things would have been for me if I was really critical of myself? And same thing in high school, trying to just get through school. Can you imagine how much worse that would have been if I was constantly criticizing myself? Yeah? So as you have these big dreams, I had the big dream of just breaking the cycle. I just wanted to not be like my family, and that was unrealistic. But I couldn't criticize myself every time I made a mistake or things didn't go to plan. So the greater the goal, the greater the ambition, the larger the need for you to take care of yourself, love yourself, and have compassion and patience. Lead the way. You're all leading the way regardless. Every single moment at school, at home, in front of your peers, you are actually already by default an example to those around you, even in your peers. Whether you want to be a leader or not, you are. Okay? So you need to think, what type of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be a leader who's respected, who's doing their best, who's going after what they want, who looks out for others? Or do you want to be a leader who doesn't take care of themselves, who makes not very good choices, that hurts themselves and others around them? What type of leader do you want to be? What standard do you want to set? You have to make that choice because everything that you do has an impact. When I was very little, when I was 7 years old, I was so hungry, right? I hadn't eaten in like a day, and my teacher had given me a packet of chips. Yeah, it's like the first thing I've eaten in literally over a day, okay? I'm starving, I'm wafting them down, and some bully comes and smacks them out of my hand. All the chips go all over the floor, right? Everyone's laughing, everyone thinks it's funny, and you can picture it, right? It would probably look a bit funny, right? But I was devastated, I was so hungry, and I felt so vulnerable. And what does a starving 8-year-old girl do? She picks up the chips and she eats them. Yeah, that's what I did. And then that led to so much more bullying. Oh, she's gross, ew, she eats off the floor, whatever. That has stuck with, those words and that action has stuck with me for 20 years, and they will continue to stick with me. So as you are leading the way, you need to remember that every single one of your words, thoughts, actions, behaviors, all of it matter. Right? For that kid who chucked the chips on the floor, that was just probably an average Wednesday for him. Yeah? But it's impacted me for life. So please be conscious of the decisions that you make. You can choose if you want to have a positive impact or a negative one, but either way, 99% of your impact won't be visible. So think about your choices as you go along. You're all brilliant leaders. You've all been so attentive today. And the fact that you're all taking this in, I can see you soaking it in. I can see these aha moments. I know that you're brilliant leaders already, and I can't wait to see what you achieve. Before I wrap up, I will do Q&A, but I invite all of you to have some time to yourselves to discuss for a minute or two what you've learned, and then we'll do question time. Thank you. How'd it go? So annoying. So annoying about this.
What is it?
I literally tested it multiple times before I started.
It's probably our thing.
It's probably while it's connected.
Yeah, don't stress, it's all good.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you.
And it's great. I'll have a see. I saw the old.
Yeah.
When was that?
Maybe last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old have any of these been?
Probably. Maybe.
Would they have been in year 10?
No, it was year 9.
Okay, good.
But you know Ezra?
Yeah.
In year
Yeah. She's
12?
in year 11.
In year 11, year 12, yep.
Yes, they.
Yes?
Yep.
Yes. I'm so glad you know. Ezra works for me. Yeah, and he was like in the audience for that one.
Yep.
But also Ezra works for me, so has heard the story like millions of times. But maybe some of the kids have heard it.
That's all right.
But there's an update. Yeah.
She's an open book, Darian, so let's start it off. Hands up. Who's got a question for Darian?
Yes. Please ask me any questions. Yep. What happened to my sister? So I stopped communication with her when I was about 18. And the reason for that was because of her drug addiction and all of that struggle. She then became very dependent on others for money, right? And so as an 18-year-old girl who I've just gone through all of that stuff and I'm trying to break the cycle, I had to distance myself from her because she was like, Darian, can you help me with rent this week? Can you buy my groceries? Can you put petrol in my car? Can you blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you're 35. I can't. Like, I really need to look after myself. And I knew that the only way I could break the cycle for myself was if I distanced myself. So I cut contact. At the time, that was genuinely the most challenging thing I've ever experienced because she was my only family. Like, I didn't know my dad at the time. That was only last year, right? I had no aunties, uncles, cousins, nan, grandparents, no one, right? It was just her. So I literally had to cut off my only family in order for me to get away from it, yeah? So I didn't speak to her for that pretty much entire time. She reached out to me earlier this year in unfortunate circumstances. She is currently battling breast cancer and it is a very, very challenging fight for her at the moment. We've already almost lost her. She was in ICU on a ventilator, somehow recovered, but she's still battling cancer and that is still up in the air about how she's recovering. So it's uncertain. It's been really hard for me to try and support her because I still have all this pain, right? But I've had to put all of this aside and just focus on what matters, which is just being there for her. But we definitely still don't have a close relationship again yet. But I am hopeful that if she recovers that we can spend that time reconciling and becoming fun sisters again. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Yep. How's the relationship with my dad? It's interesting. It was really fun meeting him because obviously I wasn't expecting it, but I cannot tell you how odd of an experience it is meeting a stranger and then calling them dad. Like, it's really weird. Like, I don't think I've actually said I love you yet, and it's been over a year. Even though I feel love for my dad and I know he feels the love for his daughter, it's still strange relationship because we were strangers first, right? But he is incredibly welcoming, lovely. He was so excited to welcome me into my life. He remembers my mum, and he's so grateful that he has the opportunity to connect with me now. And he loves seeing that his other 3 children and now his newly found daughter are connecting well, and that's a really beautiful experience for him and for me. So yeah, it's overall very positive, but strange.
He had no idea you existed beforehand?
No idea, no. He knew that my mum was pregnant with me, but my mum was always adamant to him that it wasn't his. So he had no judgment. He was like, that's cool, I'm here to support you, whatever. But they lost contact. And in that time, there was no mobile phones, no social media. And with my mum moving house all the time, he had no way of finding her. You know, everything was landlined and, you know, post. So they lost contact, but he still had very fond memories of her and thought very highly of her. Yeah. Any other questions? Yep.
Darian, you spoke of helpful and hurtful resources. You had no resources. Like, you went to all these different schools. How did you break the cycle?
That's such a good question.
What resources did you have?
Thank you for asking. The one resource that was always consistent, even though I didn't have the same people, I always had teachers at school, right? And I even knew that even if one of them had a go at me for not doing my homework one day or something like that, that they still cared deeply for me, and they were still adults that I could trust, more so than maybe my carers or maybe my family. So yeah, I really tried to lean on my teachers for support when I needed it. And even if that was just for words of encouragement to get me by, that was incredibly helpful, and I really encourage you to do the same. All of your teachers care very deeply for you. Yeah, so that was one thing. Another thing was myself. We always forget that we have lots of resources within us. It's not just about do we have internet or clothes or money or family or whatever. Yeah, you all have yourselves. I have a brain, I can think, I can solve problems, I can be creative, and I have a drive in me to have a better life. And that drive is ultimately what got me through. So at every given point, I genuinely just made the most of whatever I had. And that might not have been much, but as you continue to make the most of what you have, you continue to compound and build those resources over time. So because I tried my best in school, because I tried to do as many extracurriculars at school as I could, I accumulated all of these skills and this knowledge and these connections that I still have today. Like, I still have connections with my teachers. I've reconnected with them. People that I did know in school, in primary school, all the different schools, I've reconnected with. And so, yeah, every moment has accumulated. But all it took was me just making the most of what I had. Thank you. Yep.
So, Darian, you're 27 now.
Yep.
So, can you explain, you did the HSC?
Yep.
How did you go from the HSC to becoming the CEO of your own company?
Great question. Really convoluted. I'll try to be as super simple as possible. So I graduated when I was 17. I went straight to uni and I enrolled in medicinal chemistry. That was my degree. I thought that I wanted to do pharmacy or medicine. That's why I went down that pathway. I worked casually in retail, just working a couple of hours a week. But that was so hard. Not the academic side, trying to look after myself in a science degree, which was really long days in the labs, and that meant not being able to work much. So trying to support myself financially and deal with my own trauma and study was a really hard balance. So I ended up leaving uni about a year and a half in, just because I was having trouble sustaining it. And I went and worked in a variety of different places, trying to get as much experience as I could. I worked in lots of really cool places. I worked in New South Wales Parliament as a secretary for a minister. I worked at the science space in Wollongong doing like science shows and planetarium shows. That's how I ended up starting to love working with kids. I tutored. I worked for a solar energy company. I did lots of different things trying to like test out what I could do that didn't require a qualification. And then I ended up getting really sick. So I couldn't sustain full-time work anymore, unfortunately. So when I left full-time work, I was like, great, now I'm in debt, I have no qualification, no backup plan, still no family, right? I have no sister at this point. What am I gonna do? So I picked up the odd student tutoring like I did in uni. And I was like, I'll just tutor until I figure out what I'm gonna do. And then I booked out my calendar within a couple of months. And then I still had all these inquiries coming through from their neighbours and siblings and stuff. And so I decided to consider, what would it be like if I hired a friend? And so I hired one of my friends who tutored, established a company. And then within a few weeks, he was booked out. And then the cycle continued, and within a few months, I had 8 staff. And then the lockdown happened. We offered free tutoring online. I got nominated for New South Wales Young Woman of the Year because of that. We came out of lockdown, had 25 staff. Then before the second lockdown, 35 staff. Lost everything with the second lockdown. And I literally started from scratch again at the beginning of 2022, like from rock bottom scratch. But I could do it quicker because I'd learned how to start a business twice before from the last 2, right? And with that came a huge determination to bridge the education inequality gaps that I faced, not just as a foster child, but also seeing the disadvantage, kids who are in rural areas, those who have low incomes, those who have disabilities or some sort of neurodivergence. I see that the system isn't able to cater for everybody equally, and I wanted to bridge that gap as much as possible because everyone deserves to have an equal playing field. So that's where I started my company by accident, but it already aligned with my mission of helping others. Yeah. Sorry for my convoluted answer. Yep.
Just from what you were just saying is that I think it's interesting, you said to us, make those micro choices, like is it helpful or hurtful? Maybe
Yeah.
I don't think it's relevant, but why not soak it up like a sponge when I'm sitting in class? You never know when it might be useful later. It's not hurting me, so why not? I think it's really interesting. How did you manage to think that for yourself without having someone like yourself tell you as a student? You thought that yourself, and then down the track, like you started tutoring. Obviously, you're quite academic. You did soak up all that knowledge, and then you had the ability to tutor others. You would have never had the ability to tutor others if you were like, well, my life's crap, my home life's crap. Why would I behave at school? Why would I do anything at school?
Absolutely.
I'll switch off.
Yep.
If you decided that you'd never have your tutoring business,
Exactly.
you'd be smart enough or academic enough to tutor.
100%. And so,
What made you make that choice to be that sponge?
well, I think what I realised was that when I was growing up, seeing my mum and my sister constantly make those bad choices and seeing the outcome that that had for themselves and for others, I just noticed the pattern that poor choices led to poor outcomes, right? You don't need to experience that or see others go through that to know that. You're all smart enough to know better than that, yeah? So, but also in those moments, every time I had the choice, hey, I can go out to a party and I can take something I shouldn't when there's no adults around, when I know that no one's gonna care if I pass out, right? I can make that choice. Or I can, go hang out with friends in a safe environment, right? Those little choices at every moment, it always felt like the easier option and the nicer option to just do something that was good for myself. Even in class, I enjoyed the process of learning. I liked feeling like, oh, that makes sense. And so it was a no-brainer for me to try in class. But I think what I encourage you to do is that even if it's a difficult thing to do, even if you don't know where you're going or what you're trying to achieve, know who you want to become in terms of your values and move towards that. Make every choice about the values that you have and you will move in the right direction. It's not like there was one moment where I was like, yes, I'm gonna be perfect my whole life. That's not what it was about. It was more like, what is most helpful in this moment at every moment. Yeah.
Just wondering, you put a picture of your mum up there just before she passed away, so I'm just wondering how that reconciliation with her. And was there ever a point where you thought to yourself that you didn't love your mum?
Two really, really good questions. Okay, so when I got taken off my mum when I was 8, I never saw her again until she desperately reached out to me before she passed away. Now, my mum is totally technology illiterate. She can't use a phone, can't navigate any sort of social media, computer, nothing, okay? So in a last-ditch attempt to find me, she didn't know where I was. She'd moved to Queensland. We both grew up down the coast together. She moved to Queensland and she had no idea where I could have been. So what she did was she sent a parcel addressed to me to a local pub in Milton, which is the suburb that I grew up in. Don't know why a pub, why not the school, doesn't, whatever. Go mum, it worked. Luckily, thank goodness, whoever received it at the pub had the decency to try and find me, and they did. And luckily, because of my business, all they had to do was Google my name and I came up. Like lots of things had to align for this to work, right? So they called my work phone and they were like, hi, there's a letter here from your mum that says she's in palliative care. Do you want the parcel? Oh my gosh. It hit me like a truck receiving that information. I literally just pulled over crying. I was driving at the time, listening through my Bluetooth. And I just didn't expect it. It took me a few weeks for me to have the courage to call her landline that was listed on the note. We had lots of really lovely conversations, and then I decided that it was in both of our best interests for me to go and see her. So I flew up to see her, and I saw her once before she passed. We had one dinner together, and it was lovely. We didn't bring up anything. We just had a meal together, mum and daughter, and it was a really bittersweet end to everything. In terms of me, hating her, I certainly hated her and my sister through my teenage years, and I had so much resentment. How could you do this to yourself and to me? Like, I hated them. But then I realized that, especially now as an adult, she was just doing the best she could with what she had. She didn't have the tools, she didn't have the support, and yes, she didn't seek it, but she didn't know how to. She didn't have the strength to, and I guess I learned to have compassion for her and empathy for her, that she did her best, and I forgave her. She didn't apologize, but I didn't need that apology to see that she needed love from someone, you know? And that brought me more peace than anything, especially knowing that she was able to pass in peace. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Yep. I love that you asked that. The question was, do I think that my experiences made me a stronger person, and would I have ended up in this situation, or would I have been more successful if I had access to more resources? Is that right? So I think that it made me stronger in some ways, but I think it also was so hard, and it continued to beat me down over and over and over again. I don't think the adversity, the struggle itself made me stronger. It was how I responded to it that made me stronger. And so, you know, all of you might not have a challenging life with like that sort of stuff, but you can still challenge yourself to achieve what you want to achieve by setting goals and going after them. That's going to be still just as hard. And you overcoming those challenges is going to make you just as strong. Does that make sense? So it's not the only way to become strong is just by going through hard things. But I do believe I did become stronger to some extent. But I also think I always had that strength. When I was young, I always resented not having access to those resources, and I still do. I think I could have done much better in school. I think I could have been financially much better off. I could have known how to swim. That's a pretty life-saving skill, and I know I can learn that eventually. There's so many things that I feel like I missed out on that I could have been in a better position today if I had that, but I've still tried to make the most of what I have. Yeah. Anyone else? Yep. Oh, I'm scared of so many things. I am really scared of failing, believe it or not, which is really funny because I advocate for how beneficial failure is. And I have failed so many times, and I know I'm going to continue to fail. And I have this awareness, but I'm still scared of it. We all are. It's human nature, right? Because it's unknown. I think I'm afraid that I won't reach my potential, especially given that I'm only working with what I have. And even though I'm doing much better now, I'm still thinking about where I could be. So I guess another fear is that I'm not making the most of what I have in terms of enjoying the experience. I think a personal reflection is that I need to learn how to reflect and enjoy where I'm at now, enjoy the process, and love where I'm at now, irrespective of where I'm going or where I've been. Yeah. Anyone else? Last chance, any more questions? No? Thank you.
Give a round of applause.
Thank you.
Just want to say a huge thank you on behalf of all the students and staff here today. The amount of, like, you being so vulnerable with all of us is something I don't think anyone right now could really get the courage to muster.
Thank you.
And I think